So, of course, just as we press live, my breakfast arrives, coffee arrives, and you asked, where am I? I am we took off from Sydney. So we're outside of Sydney. We're up at Lennox Heads. But we didn't get out quick enough, so we're over halfway of our isolation, and we're staying up here until we go into until Sydney says, hey, we are free and able to move around. So that's kind of where we are. Makeshift studio, makeshift office space, but we are all live and well. So where are you right now?
I'm in Sydney.
So you're in Sydney. How's that going?
Oh, it's fine. It's day 6.
Not that we're counting or anything, right?
It's Friday, so we're going to do a Zoom 1 at 9. That's just how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's a funny season we're in, and I think that it's sort of like unpredictable, yet this and how do we, I was just asking someone the other day, literally around this, but how do we even sort of move forward when there's all these variables that keep hitting us across the pathway, right? And we go, how do we even make decisions going forward? Like, how are you doing that right now?
Well, it depends on the decision.
Yeah.
Different types of decisions of, different ways you make those decisions. Sometimes it's plain. Sometimes you ask somebody. Sometimes you do lots of analysis and you figure out the right answer. So I don't know. Depends on the decision.
Yeah, look, it's just such a broad question in the way that I asked that, but I just kind of, we've got to make decisions, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's in, the next business decision we're making. And like, a lot of people want us to lead as leaders across the globe right now, but I often wonder if, and how do we do this if it is so unpredictable at this moment? So we have data that obviously shows us where we're at to today, but we've got to keep making decisions going forward. So how do we do that in such an unpredictable world?
Well, again, I like to break something huge like that down into chunks. So,
Love it.
Otherwise it's too overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has their own decision pathways. So some people would just throw themselves into just talking about that answer. But for me, I'm kind of like trying to hone it down. What kind of decision are you trying to talk about here? Because they're very different ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's when you start talking about big topics. So today, by the way, welcome to the decision table. We are just going to have a conversation, but I was literally just thinking about that before I jumped on. And there's so many big questions we can ask and conversations that we can have. And I know in your world that, you get to make some big decisions. But then it's like, how does the everyday person now put this into practice or do this more effectively? And so I love the fact that you go, hey, we can answer this in this big way, different depending what it is, but let's break it down to what it is. So if it's okay with you, I'm hoping to break down some things, go down some rabbit holes, have some conversations. I'd love to ask you a question around this, and that is, how have you built resilience over the last little while?
Again, a big question. It's a muscle.
Yeah.
And with the muscle, it means it doesn't come naturally. Some people are probably born genetically more predispositioned to have resilience, but then they enter the world, in their upbringing, which then shapes how they are resilient or not. And then they may learn and read up on the theory of resilience and learn models and tools, and then they can exercise them to build the muscle. But then you don't really know you have it until you're tested by life.
Yeah.
So
have you been tested through life?
We've all been tested through life, but I think, someone who says they haven't been tested through life is completely lucky or completely in denial.
It's definitely not been me. I'll have to tell you that one.
But then everyone's been hit by COVID, so how could you not say you're learning resilience in this time? So resilience is actually interesting. I think, I don't think you can say that you're resilient. It's almost like you have resilience and you can cope with things that have happened in the past. So next time around, you're confident that you can bounce back or go through them.
Yeah.
So resilience is interesting because, I'm sure people have said to you, oh, you're so resilient. And it's all relative, isn't it?
I love that. It is totally relative. But in some ways, there's definitely people who are more resilient, I would say. Definitely people who know how to access that muscle and exercise that muscle, just like mental toughness. Like there are some people that would face COVID, as we've all hit across the globe, and some will take it head on and go, we just make whatever happens. We've just got to make the best of that, use what's in our hands, go for it. And then there's others that probably will complain about it and not stop complaining about it until it's no longer an issue. And then what I was just going to say was, and maybe there's others that even, we go, so how do we do this? Don't even know where to start, right? So I think there's a bit of a spectrum when we think about it.
Yeah, and I also think that just because somebody is not complaining about it doesn't mean they're coping well with it.
Oh, I like that.
Okay, so people react. I always break it down into simple terms. When something happens or an emotion, which is what we measure, right? People express emotions either in two ways, externally or internally, or they express their reaction internally or externally. So just because somebody doesn't complain about it or whinge about it doesn't mean that they're actually dealing with it well.
I like that. Okay, so I didn't even know that we're going to go down into this bit, but this is no, I love it. This is such a passion of my heart right now in the work that I'm doing, and that is, how do we measure? If we look in a business organization and we're looking at culture and how we're building that out, if we know that how we feel, how physically well we are today, what's happening in our personal life, and we take that into the professional life, how do we measure in a way that becomes more of a priority? Because here's the thing, when we're physically well, when we're feeling happy, when we have emotional, like we take on board and analyze what the emotional state is of our people, whether yourself, whether your team, whether your organization, this has a result or an outcome from this is things like retention, things like economic growth, things like productivity, yet we're not putting that as priorities or KPIs. So how do we measure something like this?
Okay, I'm going to use an analogy.
Beautiful.
So measuring something like how people feel in an organization or culture is actually very, very difficult to do in a conventional way. And when I say that, it means, for example, the analogy is, how do I know that my plant is flourishing? You can either measure its output, its fruit, or how green the plants are. You can start to see whether there's some disease on it, signs of some, sort of infection, that's a symptom of a problem, or you could measure the acidity of the soil. Those things are sort of measures that you can take, which you can take into the workplace. Productivity, how much output, how many sick days or time off. Those are sort of the hard measures, but it doesn't mean that the culture of the place or the health of the plant is actually firing to the best of its potential.
Yeah, exactly.
What I actually think is that we, of course, you cannot improve on anything you're not measuring, but I love
that. Wait on. That was a droplet of wisdom right there. Say that again. Repeat that again. I think, I know this, but I want to make sure anyone's listening to this gets that piece. Can you repeat that last one again?
You know what? Sometimes things come out of my mouth that I've just
Oh, girl, you're a woman after my own heart. All right.
But I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. That's resilience for you. Don't give up, even if you've got a
excellent. I'm with you on that.
Okay, let me channel the juju again.
Yeah, because it was so good.
Okay, so you can't improve on anything if you don't measure it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
However, not all things are easily measured. Way. So my theory in a culture context, in a workplace, is that's it. Culture is people, and emotions are things that people feel, but you cannot see how somebody feels until they express it. So, but if people don't express it, then how do you measure it?
Yeah,
I think it's the real. This is where, the EQ and the soft skills, being the side of being a manager or a leader in an organization or a co-worker, being when there are some people in the group that just have really good high IQ, and they can sense when the mood is off, or they can, without anyone saying. One of my daughters is like that. We tell her she's got high superpowers, right? She's very emotional, very intense, but she's highly empathetic. She's the first to spot the kid that's feeling sad without even the kid saying anything, right? So people have those skills, and we can develop those skills, but some people naturally have that ability to read the energy of a room.
Yes.
So when you're talking about culture, it's about energy. It's with people. And to build a good culture is not about policy or hard measures or measuring things like what I said, productivity, absenteeism, all that stuff. I actually think it's about training or putting in place the right people to manage other people, those that demonstrate this natural ability to have emotional quotient. So when
that's interesting. Can I just break that down? Because I think that's an interesting concept, because that means then those that have that skills are the ones to then manage people. I am on the understanding in my world where I don't want to be managed. I don't know about you, but I was never good at being managed. I don't like managing people, and I don't like being managed. But I love to learn. I love to develop. I love to stretch my thinking and to evolve. And I think old school leadership, and I'll challenge this. This is part of the decision table. By the way, there's no judgment, and you can still have this as your belief. But I want to challenge that thinking, because I think that a lot of the old school thinking is this is the three ways that we do things, and this is how we do it, and we manage people. And one of the things, and this is part of all the insights and researching that I've been doing, and a book that I'm writing right now, which is called Humanity as Stakeholders, which I believe is the future of leadership. And when I look at things like the way we can manage versus what if we have a different conversation and we use different lenses to have that conversation. And I think that one manages, one says this is the way to do it, and the other finds how we can coexist as an ecosystem to actually get the best out of that ecosystem, no matter what the differences are at the table. Any thoughts around that?
Oh, lots.
I love it. Bring it on.
So firstly, there's a difference between a manager and a leader. That's point one.
Yep, I agree.
And I think your religious aversion and allergic reaction to management, I share the same. But it doesn't mean we're not manageable. I think management is control. Nobody likes to be controlled. So it's the different. Like, I'm sure in your life you've had excellent managers who got you.
Or maybe I have not, and that is why I've got this aversion to it. Maybe I need some therapy around that one. No, for sure. There's been some amazing managers that have been a part of my world.
Yeah,
I've just seen a lot that haven't as well. Same in leadership, by the way.
Yeah, which is why you and I are not in the zoo anymore, right?
Exactly. I love it.
So I think management, the word management, and I work with language and the nuance of language and words, because words have power and meaning.
Yes.
So with management, we have an aversion to it because the way that it was done felt control, and it doesn't suit our style. But a good manager is actually somebody, again, back to the plants, somebody who nurtures and tends to the plants based on that in plant circumstances.
I like that. Yeah, I like that thought. So they're more the nurturing that culture within.
It's a nurture role.
I can go with that.
See, there you go. You've got children, right?
I absolutely 6 of them. What about you? I know, 6. Crazy, right? 6. And here's the other piece. I'm actually a GG, so I've got 3 grandbabies as well. I know, crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
All of you, Lang. No, just kidding. Thanks.
You mean all of Olay? Used to be all of Olay.
Oh, is it Olay? See, that's how much I don't even use it.
That's how I know what all of you was.
Oh, okay.
I know what we used to all use. All of you land. It was what we thought was going to bring the beauty in this.
That's right. The ageless beauty that we all have. That's right.
Like harmful stuff in it. Now we know, right?
I know exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And how many kids? Wait on. How many kids do you have?
I got 2.
I've got 2. Beautiful. Oh wow.
And that's enough. Enough.
Yeah, I know. By the way, 6 is enough. There's no more after that either.
Oh, like 1 is enough.
That's a whole different story.
Oh, anyway, okay, we can talk about that, but we won't. So I just think that, as you are a master in parenting. You've got 6. So parenting is the same as management. It's like you nurture your child or you control your child. It's the same. And I used to use this question in an interview to sense what the manager's, management style was. So I'd ask them the question, do you have any children? Oh, yeah, tell me about your children. So this will tell. Like if they answer in the way that says, oh, I've got a child, he's really good at maths and he's like this and he's in the psych center, you know what they value. But then if they answer something like, oh, I've got one that's really artistic and it's really funny and just gets along with everything, then so it's that's a real tell. And so not that I have really used that honing device very well, because I have really gone for roles where the managers were really bad.
Like really bad. I get it.
Like, you get married at the altar and then you realize, holy
what
crap,
did I just do?
How do I get out of this?
Yeah, exactly.
We've all been there. So it's hard. But I think sorry, the truth is just
go. Keep going.
It's around it's not around policy or structures or frameworks. Bring it back down to one-on-one relationships and why do people manage? I think there are people who need to really question themselves. There are people in my world, again, very simplistic way, 2 types of people. One, people like to manage because they actually like to work with teams and nurture and, care for the farm. Then there's the other one, which then wants to manage to have people, headcount, kingdom building type mentality. They're not good managers. They just want to amass more and more people because more happens. You get paid more when you have more people, and you kind of look more important when you have more people that report into you, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, I love that. And just going back to my writing at the moment, so it's kind of in my head a lot. So probably some questions today are coming out of that. But when I talk about humanity as stakeholders, I think of humans like you and I. That's as simple as it is. Like, it's funny when you talk about humanity, people think this big concept, and I go, no, you, I, that makes us humans. We're part of humanity, right? Like, it's as simple as that. But when we think about the decisions we're making in building out the cultures that we are doing going forward, I think about that as, are we adding value to to the table, or are we taking away? In other words, are we adding to humanity going forward or taking away from it? As simple as that in the decisions that we're making. And so the reason behind these questions, and I think is fascinating having a conversation with you around it, is that we need to get back to that human connection. In other words, knowing that I am a human. I'm a mom with like kids. I'm also a businesswoman. I'm also an investor. I'm lots of, and I'm really geeky in who I am and what I bring to the table. Like, I'm really analytical. I love data, but I'm also extremely creative. I'm one of those freaks that literally work in both sides very strongly of the brain. And I'm ambidextrous. So I've got this theory around all of this as well. And I love getting theories and trying to either break them or see that they're real theories, and then work what are those patterns to make those happen, right? So there's a lot of things that I go human to human, and then let's get that data happening and let's connect those things, because culture will not change if we don't measure. You've said that already, right? Like, and I go, how do we measure? Because if we take a little thing that's happening right now, we see an increase of we see an increase at the moment of what is it? Not mental. Mental illness. I don't know. What is it in businesses right now? Those sort of things, right? Like, we're seeing an increase on that. People are feeling, there's going to be a lot of PTSD, I reckon, from this pandemic as well. And we're already seeing some of that things, but we haven't seen the full consequences of it. So we can either ignore that and just go, our KPIs in our business, our organization are just going to be on these data because we want the data on that to see how we can keep moving forward. I think if we do that, we are going to be missing absolute important integral things that will actually give us more growth going forward. So how do we do that? Like, how do we bring that in as a key performing indicator in what we're building out? Because I get that emotional and EQ is hard to do, but I also think that if we're asking the right questions and we're keeping data on those, whatever those answers are, then that will give us data to make better decisions going forward. I know that was roundabout, but it's still forming in my head as I'm sort of gathering more insights around this and have more conversations with people. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I do, but they're not structured thoughts. I'm trying to pin you down on what.
That's what we're doing. Like, this is why I want to have them, because I think part of this new approach to leadership is that we're not necessarily knowing all the answers right now. We're not knowing how to do this better and more effectively. But I do, without any doubt, know that we have to have conversations like this. We have to start asking different questions so we can disrupt patterns of where we have been going to change that for different results at the table.
I think it's having the right people having those discussions. Not having. So in my mind, you can have all these discussions on the ground in middle management, but ultimately, if the decision makers who need to approve of the change are not in that conversation, I think it's a waste of time, which is what we've seen a lot in workplaces in around DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equality. DIE. That's a bad acronym. It's DIE.
Oh, it is too. Okay.
Should change it. Anyway, so you know that it's been around for a while. It's a hype. Everyone's talking about it. But you know what? The wrong people, sorry, the right people are not in the conversation, and hence we still have this inertia with real change. Do you agree?
Yes, totally. So how do we get the right people at the table having this kind of conversation?
It goes back to human to human. What's in it for them personally? It could be my reputation as a leader. It could be my salary, my job. It could be anything. You have to appeal to that individual's motivations to join that conversation. And that's with anything.
Tell me more about that. I'm listening because I'm wanting to learn more of where you're going with this.
Okay, so for example, yesterday there was something that came through on my LinkedIn feed that said the KPMG leader, I don't know what his role is, but he's the Uber leader of KPMG in Australia, just started, and immediately he put in effect 26 weeks of parental leave, no questions asked, no tenure required, done. Now, right, how long have they probably been talking about that? Years. Right? So it takes the leader who makes the ultimate decision to be part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we've all been talking about it in Middle Earth. I call middle management Middle Earth. You know?
I love that, Middle Earth.
You know what I mean? And so it's all motivations. And I think if you bring it back down to one-to-one people, I don't think there's enough of the right people having the right conversations. And this is the work that I do with my my company. We listen to the people through big data and AI. And then we know about what people are feeling and saying around issues that matter. And, you know, so it's the disconnect in the system, which is the, you know, decisions need to have the right information, but they also need to be in the right conversation. So there's beautiful right conversations, but there's no catalyst because there's no authority to change anything, because the structure of a corporation is hierarchy, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's not always a triangle. It might be in different shapes, but, you know, there's levels to which decisions are made, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So then that begs the question, well, why? Like, for example, you go to politics, the ultimate pinnacle at the moment, you know, is the Prime Minister, who is, you know,
correct,
who's got people around him. Now, we see there's a lot of disconnect with the conversation that's happening on the ground on Earth, and the lack of what seems to sound like the inability to listen, even glaringly obvious. So again, in my mind, you know, what's the motivation behind that individual's person, like in their head, that stops them, prevents them from being part of the conversation? And when we're saying part of the conversation, it actually means conversation. It means I listen, I really listen, then I about that's a conversation. What we have a lot also is ineffective communication, where I'm standing here talking about it and I'm waiting for you to finish what you're going to say, and then I'm going to say my turn. That's not a conversation that gets anywhere. It's
exactly.
So that also is an element of dysfunctional communication, which then so if you don't have the right people in the right conversation, you don't have the conversational skills, and you don't have the right questions, and you don't have the right data, what's the point? And that's where we're at.
Yes.
Nothing changes. It just becomes wasted energy. And then
I so agree. I so agree on all of that. So, yeah, we've got to get the right people, right conversations, and then we've got to ask questions.
Right.
Or we've got to listen to the data that we already have and ask better questions, knowing that we have data that we have. Would you agree on this, or is there more around that?
Listening.
And listen. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, not here, listen.
Yeah. So what are you seeing from the data that you're gathering? What are some of the big things that we need to listen to today?
Well, this is such an interesting time.
By the way, before you answer that, Janine's saying, hey, Tutua, the smartest woman I know. Hey, it's because of Janine we are here today. So thank you.
Hi.
And I agree, she is one smart cookie over there.
Janine's on the board of Maven Data, so she's been very gracious connecting with lots of fantastic people, including yourself. So yes, thank you, Queen Janine. Hail Queen Janine.
That's right, exactly. A moment for Janine Garner. If you don't know her, go find out about her. She's awesome.
Sorry, I got sidetracked.
Me too. I always do when Janine's in the house. We have a bit of fun, that girl and I.
What was your question?
Yeah. So with the data, what do we need to listen to now? What are you seeing?
What am I seeing? Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So we measure the pulse of people through internet data, websites, everything outside a firewall. So we analyze using AI petabytes of this content, and we then measure and test sentiment towards any topic. So we have recently been studying vaccine hesitancy and released our report, which is a nice story commentary based on our data, and we tell it in a way that sheds a light on issues like vaccine hesitancy, but from a public sentiment lens, as and as events of news roll in. So it's like the data delivered differently, right? So what we're seeing is that earlier in the year, I had already seen vaccine hesitancy as very strong, meaning people do not want to take the vaccine, COVID vaccine, for a variety of reasons. Now, this is well before the rollout shambles, well before the AstraZeneca blood clotting concerns.
Yeah.
Before, this was even at the time when the government was saying we're at the head of the queue. When everybody by October 2021 in Australia will be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So this was back then, and we had already started to see hesitancy coming through quite strongly. So this is quite contrary to what was talked about in the news and what they survey in polls, and the polling data and that sort of information is what guides government actually at the moment on a lot of major things. So we're here saying, look, vaccine hesitancy is really intense. It's increased over time, and it's increased over time despite lockdown, right? And that's the thing. So right? The theory was the more we're in lockdown, the more we want to get out of lockdown. And that
so we all go get vaccinated. Yeah.
Exactly. But that wasn't the case. And we tested South Wales sentiment and Victorian sentiment because these two states had very, very, very different experiences with lockdown, right?
Totally.
Now, what's interesting is that the data said that despite Victoria being in fourth lockdown, right, that vaccine hesitancy has continued to increase.
Yeah.
Now, you can look at that data and go, oh, I don't believe that data. A lot of people say that stuff all the time. I don't believe it because I don't understand it. Okay, fine. But we've got many, many proof points to say that our methodology has been accurate in predicting the future. And so when we're saying vaccine hesitancy has increased and it's still very strong and intense, we need to do something about it.
Wow.
Because the official government line, even by the health minister recently, said in a press conference that vaccine hesitancy is not an issue. There is no hesitancy towards the vaccine.
Yeah. But here's the issue when things like that happen, right? Yeah. Is some people go, oh, I just heard that, so that's now a truth. And then they make decisions based on that as a truth. Then others go, oh, look, we're just hearing so much that is not true because we can back it up over here. So where do we, I love the fact that you go, hey, we've got different points along the way that proves that this is proven data. But we need to hear more about that kind of thing. So how do we get more of awareness around data we can trust so we can make better decisions?
Well, that's my charge every day of the week.
I'm giving you the open platform to tell us. Yeah. Because I think this is really interesting. And I think that part of, if I talk about leadership, as leaders, it is hard to lead when you don't trust the system. And that is kind of scary. If we look at the political space right now, who's in leadership, and if there are people in leadership within that don't trust the system or what's being said, then that's what we're getting policies made around. That's what decisions, that's how our school system is being built on. That is kind of a scary environment. So how do we take good data that actually can be trusted, and we trust that system and then make more effective decisions?
There's many parts in the conversation around, can the data be trusted? Data itself is not an evil thing. It's just a collection of information, events, behaviors, etc., captured in electronic format for analysis. In essence, data is not the evil.
No, I agree.
How do you process data? Is through technology, say algorithms. The algorithm is not evil. AI is not evil. It's humans who perform good and bad on the data that's used, on the algorithms that are deployed. So it's like this. Guns don't kill people.
Yeah.
People kill people with guns. So when you talk about can the data be trusted, it's more around, can the people who translate the data be trusted?
Oh, that's good.
Because when you look at data, you can analyze it in so many different ways. You give a data set to 10 different people, everybody will cut and dice it and have their own way of interpreting what comes out of it. Guaranteed.
Yeah, because we've got biases, we've got our own conditionings we're taking to the table. But that's where I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that it's around having a different conversation and getting the right people at the table with the right data.
And part of the right people is that not only being able to listen, but there's an element of being open-minded to actually go, you know what? I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I will never know everything. So I need to have multiple perspectives.
Correct.
And listen to them all. So, you know, I just very simply, again, I just look at the situation with politics. Why is politics so disengaged with what should be happening? We all kind of sense what the right thing to do with these big issues, right? Climate change, you know, relations with other countries, whether we...
Oh, you mean as humans, we've got some brains we could use ourselves? Yeah.
We've got hearts and brains.
Hearts and brains. Yes, I like that.
But the issue is that I think the current system of politics, it's not good for efficient decision making like in corporations. So not to say that corporations are perfect, but at least in a corporation, you've got a structure where the CEO, who makes the ultimate call, will have around the decision table all the chiefs of the different departments providing their lenses on a decision.
Yeah.
So chief strategy, chief marketing, chief finance, chief operations, chief legal, chief. That's the roundtable conversation of which the CEO will then, you know, be able to elicit and listen, you know, and generate the environment that allows them to offer their opinion and their advice. Ultimately, it's the CEO's call, is it not?
Well, that comes back to, will they take ownership of that?
Well, that's another element of that. But ultimately, you know, that the process of the decision-making around the decision table is it's multidisciplinary, right?
Absolutely.
So when you look at politics, I just don't see that happening because I don't know how they really make decisions, but there's advisors to each minister. And a minister actually, it's like, you know, when they keep shuffling the chairs of the minister, the portfolios.
Yeah.
One day they're defense, another day they're trade, another day they're legal, another day they're innovation. That doesn't happen in corporate. The finance manager doesn't then go and become the legal counsel, who then jumps and becomes the chief strategy officer. Like,
good point.
Happen, right? But it happens in politics. So then what happens? These ministers who have incredible power are advised by advisors. Now, I don't know anyone that I respect in business who's actually worked as a political advisor. So then you go, who are advising these people? Then you go...
I often wonder that, by the way, who are advising?
And they're usually young people. And I don't have anything against young people at all. I was once a young person.
I still am. What are you talking about?
But, you know, like you look at the model of what's going on and you start to unpick and go, that's what's happening. And then the data that they collect, that they rely on most heavily, because it's in politics, you only get to play in that chair if you get voted in. So there's that circular tail wags the dog problem. The polling data is some of their key sources of information. And polling data, how is that collected? It's just a sample of about 3,000 people's opinions. And what we say to someone doesn't necessarily mean we mean it. We might not tell the truth.
Or we might not, like we've had today on this conversation, we might not have processed it all. There might be more layers we need to go down to cement that as yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And that's where we'd go next for the next step, right? Like this is part of having a conversation. And I think, just in part of that is why it's so important for us to be able to have conversations like this, where we don't have it all sorted. You said it yourself before, we don't have all the answers, but we have to have a willingness to have the real data and a real conversation around it. Like, here's a question in the comments. How do we get the media to share the truth versus their version of the truth or the facts? And I think this goes back to it, right? Like, if we can't discuss it in an open forum, the true facts, even if we don't even know exactly what next step is, then I don't have those facts to even start thinking about, being curious around, making maybe my own decisions, and then decisions I make with my children. I'm only making it from someone who is taking whatever information they have, and now they're telling me that's the truth. And I think, if you were to answer that, how do we get the media to share the truth versus their version of truth or facts? How do we do that?
Media is another beast and another ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think in what I sense in this one is that media have their own agenda, as with any organization has their own agenda. And an agenda is not a bad thing. An agenda could be purely financial, purely whatever. It's not about what the purpose of that agenda is, but everything has an agenda. So when you look at media and their agenda, you can really, which mastheads have left-leaning, right-leaning, this or that. We know who owns them, who also have their own agendas. Now, you just put that into context in that world, but we're also seeing that there are individual voices now, like yourselves, creating media. You are a media channel, even if it's a small one compared to the big guys, right? So it all comes down to people will naturally gravitate to who they feel they trust. And that trust has to be earned over time.
Yeah.
You can't just go out and say, just trust me.
Good point. I think we often want to, though, right?
Right. So you have to earn it over time. And so then you can see why general media now, like they're scrambling to get people to fund their subscription model. Because that model doesn't work anymore. We can get news that we trust for free without an agenda that I know of. So this is the natural falling away. It will take time because these big systems are going to hold on as hard and as long as possible. But ultimately, if they don't have people watching and reading them, advertisers will fall away and that model will implode. It will take time. And some have already died. Print has died because of that model. Print, you physically have to have the high cost of printing, whereas digital, you can get away with it's lower cost, but the journalists have gone. The independent journalists have gone, right? But you know what? Independent journalists, they can now get spread out. They can be independent now. They can, I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's going to take some natural evolution. So when it comes back to the question of how do you make decisions when there's information that you feel you can't trust? Well, you just have to find ways of sticking with voices that you feel are trustworthy.
I like that.
And time will tell, right? You can feel the tone and the angle when you read an article. Yeah. One event happens in market, like COVID vaccine announcement about something. One media outlet will take it off that tangent. One will take it there, and then you just have this natural affinity to who you feel represents your voice, and you will be reading more of that. Now, whether it's truth or not, we will never know, honestly, unless you generated the news yourself and then you saw it reproduced somewhere else, then you call that whether it was true or false. But none of us are in that position, and we will never be. It's about, again, having that layer of translation that you feel you trust. Not really an answer.
I like that. I really like that. What was that?
It's not really an answer, but it is an answer.
It is. I like that. I think what I love about that is it pricks curiosity in my brain. And I go, so how do we do that more effectively? What would that need to look like? That's where I immediately go when you start, injecting some curiosity within me. I also go to that point that I go, so how do we future-proof this? How do we now, when we look at where the state of economy is, not just in Australia, but across the globe, when we look at environmental things that are happening and the challenges there, and then we look at social impact and we go, how do we future-proof? Because all of us only have 24 hours, 7 days a week. And you say it takes time to listen to voices, to get, and get trusted sources. And it's like, yeah, but these things are only the gap between problem and solution is only going to keep widening. And that's a scary thing for our next generation and the generations to come. So for me, that's like, whoa. So how do we narrow that gap, build those relationships, hear those voices, trust those sources, but also know we're shifting the dial from problem to solution and narrowing that gap? That's where I go now that you've just beautifully had this conversation with me. I know that's like, woo, but that's literally where my brain goes now.
Yeah, your brain goes like this.
It does. And then it comes right back down.
You have to bring you back down.
I do. So here's just a little funny thing. I had a collaborative partnership. I want to build out this community, not based on one person, but with collaborative partners. And so because of that, it's not as easy as building out just with one person and this is what you're doing. And I just knew there was this, everything else I'm great with, but there was this one piece that I wasn't great with. And I was like, if we don't put this in the foundational of where we are going and what we're building out as culture within here, and we don't measure it as part of the things that is priority for us going forward, we're going to miss it. So I nearly killed everyone in that conversation, because as one person said it so beautifully, they said, you went for this real big deep dive and you took us with you. And then you saw us all going, and you brought us all back up again. That's what I do. But I only do it, by the way, with people who I feel can come with me on that. So other times I will just go at this level. But you are doing such important work. You're thinking what you've done. I don't even know a lot about you. I just, I know through Janine, pieces of it and what you've just, how I've got to know you over this conversation. And I just think if you know what you know, then we need to be more aware of that so that I can, and others listening can make more effective decisions going forward.
Well,
she goes, where do I take that? It's okay. I get it. Just breathe.
I'm gonna respond to one thing that you said at the start, which was, how do you future-proof? Right? Now, I'm going to actually challenge you and say, to put it in those words puts a lot of pressure, because it's ultimately the future is, we can't determine the future. It will always be different to what we think it is going to be.
Oh, this is interesting.
So why spend time and energy and angst on trying to proof against the future?
Oh, I love that. Can I just say why I'm saying that? Because it's come up in so many conversations lately. And part of it is through people in the Australian defence, who are saying we need to future proof. And that is why I'm bringing it up as questions, because I have a problem with it as well.
Well, of course, you're talking to someone from defense who all they do is defend.
I know, but I think there's something about it that we need to listen to.
Yeah, but you know what? That's why I don't work in that world of defense.
I love it.
I'll be constantly looking behind my back, feeling in threat and worried about it. They do lots of what if scenarios, and they're brilliant at calculating what if happens, and then they optimize the solution to best future proof for a future attack.
I love that.
From some future unknown, by some future method of some future destruction which we cannot quantify. Like, that to me is a waste of. I'm not saying we don't need defense, because we are in this world, right? But that's not how I think about the world. And if I did,
I love it.
I'd be paralyzed. So for the rest of us who don't feel the need, let the defense force deal with that. They're good for that.
By the way, they're not the only ones saying it. It was just, it's come up quite a few times through a few people within that. And, there are some that say it in the business world right now. And moving into AI, definitely that we need to be future-proofing against where AI is used by humans in the wrong way.
But you're going to get that with somebody who works in, assessing a paper form that you went to fill in an application for a bank credit card back in the day. Like, they have the wrong processes. They didn't mean to do it wrong. You get rejected for your credit card. You don't know why. How's that?
So good.
That's different to AI. AI just basically automates it so it does it faster and more accurately, consistently. Like, it's the processes that are at fault, not the technology that are at fault.
Oh, I love it.
It's everyone blames AI. It's like, no, we made the algorithm. AI automates stuff.
Yes.
So if you've got a bad process, it just amplifies the bad process.
Oh, that's so good.
So, this is the frustration I have, because the level of awareness, and I'll have to say literacy in data and education is quite behind the rest of the world, which is reflecting in the way that we respond to narratives like AI and data.
Yes.
We trust the data. As I said, data is just an input. It's not evil. It's what you do with it,
Oh, I so agree. You're a woman after my own heart, like, seriously. Because but I also think that when data in the process of putting that data together to get the algorithms through the AI, that we do need the right people having the right conversations at the table, so that we are looking at humanity as stakeholders as those decisions are made. So I do believe there is a part of that. And I have talked in quite a great global space around this conversation. And I said, my concern is that in 20 years' time, that the data that you're using, the AI that they were using, you haven't considered how this has an effect on human beings. And maybe I just haven't seen something around it. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And they said to me, this is a great concern, and you are right. And we haven't even looked through that lens. And that we have, and they literally said to me, we have no idea what this will mean in 20 years' time. So when I hear stories like that, that's the piece that I don't like. When I know that I had a son who had a lot of special needs, wasn't even meant to make birth, and there is much AI that has been created in the medical that I am so grateful for. And when I know, the thing that I really truly believe is when we can meet with AI and we know as a human how to use the muscle of human intelligence that I talk about all the time. And I believe that this is part of the new approach to leadership, is when we know how to exercise that. When we can combine those things, that to me is giving us a future, and a future for our generations.
I've got nothing to add to that.
So,
I mean, you did ask a question and then you answered your own question. So, like, okay.
No, because this is things I just love that I've been able to have this conversation with you, because I think, you know, you say we need to have more awareness around it. That's because we're not having these conversations. And I'm just so grateful that you were willing to have this conversation so that we can bring it to the attention again, right? And to have, you know, and cement some of these things in our brain. So if people want to know, by the way, more about what you do and who you are, where do they go? Where's the best place? They go Google.
It's the easiest. I don't say
that
anymore. It's just Google and find whatever thing grabs your attention.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So the only question I do ask on every decision table, and we've come to that point right now, and that is this: what are you taking from our conversation today?
That there are other crazy boof idea people like me out there, and that there are people who have 6 children and run multiple businesses and have so many hats that are still functioning and have enough drive and energy to hold these conversations. So hats off to you. That I actually see a lot of positive, I see a positive future despite the fact that we all feel this at the moment. It's all a necessary part of the process. You can't change without having a bit of agitation, right? Like we have to shed this skin. It's going to take some time, but with people like yourselves who are pouring energy and time into, you know, creating movements and conversations, it feels small and inconsequential. It actually does have a ripple effect, and you know, it all starts from the ground. So everything is going to be back to people, I believe. My job is to connect leaders closer to the people through better listening using data and AI.
I love that. Oh, what I'm taking from today's conversation, so many things. I'm actually going to go through some of the things because like you have pricked some of my curiosity to go deeper in some of the conversation that we've had today. But I love how we've brought together things like trusting the system, and even, you know, even though there is much data that we don't want to be listening to right now, there is data if we listen to the right voices. If we want to see the data, find the data, it is there. And that was really interesting. And the other piece that I really loved was the whole human to human, even though I talk about it all the time, humanity as stakeholders, that piece around this is not necessarily just a quick fix. And I think this is the tricky piece of my work across the board and has continued to be. But I love having this conversation with you around this, is that we are here knowing that each step that we're making is shifting that dial closer and narrowing that gap. And I think that's the piece that I'm taking from our conversation, is that it is these, even at times feels like insignificant conversations. It's at times wondering, why is this data? How can we prove that this data? It's just like, no, with the right people, the right conversations and listening, we can keep shifting that and narrowing that gap. So, oh my gosh, I'm taking so much from our conversation. I just want to thank you so much for being here and connecting, because, you know, Janine said, hey, we need to connect. And both of us go, I have no idea why, but let's just connect. So thank you for being willing to have a conversation, press live, do it like this. Is there anything you want to leave before we close off the broadcast? And don't run away straight after, but I want to end this broadcast. Is there anything that I haven't let you be able to say today that you've not been able to say?
No, I mean, if anything, I'd like, you know, the opportunity to socialize the launch of our new service called
Perfect.
We've launched Maven Pulse yesterday.
Ooh, and well done.
Thank you. So it's essentially what we've been talking about. born out of the frustration of reading news and sort of hearing it from a one lens dimension. We decided to take upon putting commentary on world events and things that impact all of us through, showcasing our insights and commentary on these events like COVID-19 and vaccine hesitancy, putting our lens based on what we measure in public sentiment in relation, in reflection to these events. And then we produce a beautiful, witty story with facts and stats and AI in it. So it's about elevating the conversation. It's about putting a different angle on news of the world. Bit of light reading, but it's there to prick your brain.
Yes.
And to showcase that, I do see a pathway out of this vaccine rollout debacle. I really do, because the data tells us very clearly what should we do. How should we communicate? What do people care about? What they're scared about? If you know all that information, it's just one big communications campaign.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do here. It's influencing people, but you've got to start by deep listening, which starts going back to ground source, internet data. What are we observing? What are we reading about people online, etc.? And then for me to translate what I see.
Oh, I love that. And you have translated what you see so beautifully today in this conversation. So I'm going to end the broadcast now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.